Hello buddy, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around we are on the steps of Kekongor, playing as the force of the Empire against the force of the Lizardmen, led by the wonderful Xiphos. And for our composition here, I really wanted to go for a wider man-spammier build, since what you often see from the Lizards themselves is a very wide swarmy composition. And as we can see here, it is going to be a battle of swarms here, since both of the armies here are numbering over 1,000 and very infantry heavy. So going to our comp here, I was decided to roll with Boris Todbringer. He's almost fully kitted out. We didn't get Deadly Onslaught in there just to squeeze in a couple extra units of infantry, and as you can see here, some solid kit. White Cloak of Ulrich, of course, great for those debuffs. Same with Crush the Weak, mitigating the Lizardmen at least a little bit, especially under 50% leadership. We also do have Hold the Line, help keep our troops in the fray, Midland Runefang for the self-heal, Foe Seeker, and then, of course, Blood Roar to nuke down enemy leadership. Lizardmen, fairly good on leadership, but units like Skinks and whatnot do tend to run, so having that Manticore with Boris is very nice. And because it's Boris, we don't have to bring a Life Caster, which frees me up to bring a Light Wizard. And I really do like a Light Wizard with Empire Man Spam, and that's for two specific reasons. One, Net of a Mintok, which of course allows you to cut down on mass a little bit, go heavier on infantry, and get more numbers, as well as the Exorcism, which, while it doesn't look that impressive, does grant 4 leadership and, most importantly, immune psychology map-wide. That means all of this infantry, all these Empire Knights, everything here on this field, except Boris himself, who of course causes fear and terror, is going to be immune to psychology, and they will be able to resist, say, a rampaging Stegodon, Mazda Mundi, Krokgar, or whatever, barging through your lines. These guys will stick through it, and that is important. So that is why I really do like the Light Wizards there. We also did bring the Shem's Burning Gaze to melt down single entities in a somewhat quick fashion, help snipe down Pterodon casters, that sort of thing, and Frost Protection to help our front line stay in the fight, or perhaps to help defend our missiles if needed. Otherwise, our line is composed of some spearmen on the very outer edges. You can see 4 units of them. These are spearmen with shields. Obviously, anticipating Chameleon Skinks, they are a very common sight in this matchup. And Xiphos has brought a pair of them, which is kind of less than you normally see, I think. But a handful of them is something you should always anticipate. And the spears will be able to zone out those chameleons at least somewhat efficiently. Behind them, 2 units of greatswords. This is one of the few matchups where greatswords can really pay for themselves and dish out some hurt. Being able to lay the smackdown on Saurus, being able to, of course, crush Skanks very efficiently, and trading even into Temple Guard rather well. Behind that, some halberdiers. We've got 4 units of these guys. They're fairly solid. Saurus, not necessarily the most shock-heavy infantry, so these guys can endure that charge pretty well initially, and then with their AP and decent melee stats, will endure in a long grind. So we got 3 units of halberds there, ready to trade tit for tat with our foes. Single unit of spears in the back, just as extra bufferage. 2 huntsmen to provide additional missile pressure. Silver bullets as well, just to focus down key targets. And then 2 knights to give us some mass. Now for Xiphos, he has gone with a very wide infantry-centric build. Interesting lore choice, at least in my opinion here, with the Kroxagor Ancient. Kind of an iffy choice, I would say. Certainly, he can do some work. He's fairly cheap. He does still get the Horn of Kygor, which is an excellent AoE buff. He also does get the Amulet of Eitzel, which is much akin. It's a loadout that's very similar to the Sarge Old Blood. He's more specialized against infantry, but infantry is something you tend to see from Empire, so not necessarily a bad choice there. And he is a little lower to the ground and tougher to hit for Empire missiles. So there is a bit of an advantage there compared to a Sarge Old Blood. At the same time, you're not as flexible as a Sarge Old Blood, which is another rather common lord choice in this matchup, and you're not as good against large because he's specialized against infantry. Ironically, against this man spamming build, that specialization is going to be useful, so we'll definitely see just how well this guy can carry. Alongside him, a Skink Priest of Heavens coming in with Wind Blast as well as the Curse of the Midnight Wind. Both very solid spells. Curse of the Midnight Wind, good for debuffing armor, can definitely help those crump those great swords with, say, the Saurus warriors who otherwise struggle with that armor a little bit, help bust through knights, that sort of thing, or help in a melee grind. Cohort of Sotek is in here as well. The red-crested Skinks, rather efficient against Empire, will trade well with just about anything Empire brings to the table. Some Saurus warriors as well. The 2 chameleon Skinks as mentioned. Some Skinks on the very far flanks, but really the meat and potatoes of the offensive force here is these Cauldron Riders, 4 units of them, as well as 2 Feral Stegodons. So very wide force of hefty monsters. if those Stegodons do plow in through my lines, they could do some major damage and disruption. And Huntsmen are not ideal against Stegodons. I was kind of hoping to be facing a more cav-centric build without necessarily Stegodons or Bastillodons, since handguns are definitely something you want against feral Stegodons. That 110 armor really does start pushing into a point where the non-AP on Huntsmen is just not enough to compensate. Or the anti-large isn't enough to compensate for the non-AP. Over here, Boris does try to get a cheeky charge on the Chameleons, but I realize that's a lost cause. And you can see here, I'm trying to engage around these rocks. I want to take advantage of this rock formation to prevent Xiphos from surrounding me. Because if we look here at the formation, he definitely has an opportunity to swing around from this flank and potentially swing around from this flank. But at least this way, you can't kind of beeline through my forces, because we do have those rocks in the way. Spears here will get engaged upon by the source, which is not where they want to be in life. In the meantime, these spears over here running for dear life. I'm just trying to keep them out of range as we unleash some volleys into the cohort of Sotek. And a volley goes in from the silver bullets against the little annoying little skink mage. So he loses a good chunk of HP there. Silver bullets, good anti-single entity unit. But a wind blast comes down in return, smashing through the Empire handgun line and sending these boys flying, flopping to the ground, knocked over. One after the other, so just falling on their faces, but still have full models, so they're not going to rout. In the meantime, here at the front line, we are seeing the Greatswords engage as Boris jumps in on the Priest. Now, big misplay here on my part, firing off Shem's Burning Gaze, looking to get a snipe on that Skink Priest quickly, getting a little overzealous, and the Light Wizard there chunks down Boris for probably a good 1300 HP, or I guess 900 or so HP, which is brutal. That is 900 HP. Boris now has to heal from friendly fire damage. Meantime, the Cold One Riders looking for their opportunity. Xiphos seeing an opening here and diving straight through, but the Halberds move forward to meet them. They will still pile into the silver bullets, but are going to take some prohibitive casualties here. Halberds, of course, anti-large AP, are having none of this, tearing up the Cold One Riders, tearing them to shreds. Knights, in the meantime, over here looking to sandwich the very annoying Cold One Riders between themselves and the spears and potentially do some major work there. Now, Huntsmen are being pressured. Silver bullets here have routed, and you can see these Huntsmen here falling back for dear life. As in the meantime, the frontline fight is definitely not going ideally. The Greatswords here hit by Curse of the Midnight Wind. Same with the Halberds, means they're not going to be hitting very effectively. And Boris here very much in a danger critical situation, getting surrounded. Halberds push in, though. The brave state troops, men of the Empire, rallying to their lord and dragging down these foul beasts and dragging them into the muck. The Cruxgore Ancient here getting stuck up. Certainly the infantry knockdown changes proving their value here, as the state troops are able to muck up some of these big boys, these Cold One Knights, those sorts of units, the Stegodons even, and especially the Cruxgore Ancient, push them back. You can see here we're able to start picking off some of these units as they pour into our backline. So certainly Xiphos is forced to breach. He's forcing back my missiles, and this is a big problem. My missiles are going to be offline, and kept offline for quite a while. But simultaneously, we are able to pick off these units one by one as they try to split off and go after different targets. And in the meantime, the Chameleon Kings here kind of wasting their ammo on the Empire Knights and the Spears, certainly debuffing and potentially and probably winning this fight because of that. But these Chameleon Kings really need to be swinging around the flank. They need to be going for this Light Wizard, for these Huntsmen, and then it's not happening. Meantime, Huntsmen able to pour some fire into the Stegodon. I put them on to fire at will at this point, realizing we really need to allow that, and just trying to pressure off these darn Cold One Riders and remove them from play. In the meantime, on the flanks, you can see the Spears here slugging it out with the Skink cohorts. This is one of the most boringest grinds in the game. Two very, very bad damage units, slaying it out, tit for tat. But with the Chameleon Skinks in there, they might actually win out. The Skinks might actually be able to grind this one out. Normally, Spears do win, but it might be able to grind it out. So Knights here do get chair routed by the very annoying Stegodon, but Boris does dive in, forcing the Cold One Riders away. And Silver Bullets are now rallying, pouring fire into the Cold One Riders, trying to swarm the Light Wizard, who pops a frost protection on himself. Unfortunately, I think a little over hasty. I should have been a smidge more patient and popped that frost protection on, say, these Spears or perhaps these Huntsmen as they were engaged on by the Stegodon. That said, we are removing that Cav from play, and I'm hoping if I can remove the Cav from play, we'll then be able to stall the Stegodons and pick them apart one by one. This Stegodon here, definitely pretty isolated. Same with this one. My opponent here, definitely doing a good job compromising everything, but simultaneously compromising everything now leaves all these characters very isolated, open to Boris's tender ministrations. Over here, Chameleon Skinks do try to push in on the Huntsmen, looking to snare them and beat them up. But one of the few counters to skirmish units like this is, in fact, guns. Guns are pretty effective at hitting skirmish formation units, and you can see they are tearing through these Chameleon Skinks, missile resist or no. Knights, in the meantime, pouring in the last 15 models, doing a glorious charge there. Of course, Immunity Psychology did get popped, at least for a little bit, with the help of the Light Wizard. And the Chameleon Skinks here, being pressured away, kept off my back for just a second. We're able to force the little nipping buggers away. And That said, good play here, shutting down these Huntsmen. This near full unit with very high ammo right now could be a massive threat if it stayed in combat, but I'm not able to keep it in combat because the Stegodon's pressuring, Chameleon Skinks are pressuring, and so Xiphos doing an excellent job shutting down my missile play, and it's becoming a dire situation. Certainly my infantry here, if we look at the front line, is winning. The halberds, the greatswords, the spears, they have won out their engagements all along this front line, but they are so far away, so detached, that the only units that can help back here are the single unit of spears and the 2 crippled units of knights. There's no longer any support that can really stop these Stegodons. And if Xiphos keeps these 2 Stegodons around, if he keeps these Cold One Riders around, runs off this missile play, it's going to be crippled Boris and a horde of infantry against a decent chunk of infantry and 2 feral Stegodons, which I don't think I can take at this stage. They'll get terror out of it. Now, Silver Bullets here probably inflicting some friendly fire. Foeseeker popped on Boris as he tries to flee, and I myself try to use the Silver Bullets here to chip down, snipe off this dumb Skink Priest. I absolutely hate him. Want him gone. I do not want any more wind blasts to potentially ruin my infantry formations, and we are going to shotgun this guy with all due haste. Cold-blooded is not going to save him. I refuse to allow it, and they get mown down. So good situation there for us. We're able to remove that Skink Priest. Boris, in the meantime, diving in on the Stegodon, blocking that chunky boy, and forcing him into a protracted melee. Now, this is a solid situation for us. We're able to pincer in this Stegodon. Not sure if Xiphos here has Cold-Blooded to stop the rampage, but we're able to pop False Protection on Boris. Now, Stegodons do not have particularly good melee stats, especially when Boris has them debuffed with the Crush of the Weak as well as the White Cloak of Ulrich. And so normally you want these guys cycle charging. With 76 charge bonus, they will hit Boris easily. But right now in this situation, it's not able to duel Boris. We're able to inflict critical damage sustained and rout this bad boy from the field. So big win for us. Unfortunately though, Light Wizard here, I kind of sacrifice him here, looking to zone, looking to screen. He takes some volleys from those Chameleon Skinks. Granted, so he's out of Winds of Magic at this stage, but really I needed to keep this guy around, use him to rout off some of these Stegodons, and we aren't able to do so. Boris, though, is pressuring the Stegodon here, looking to use his speed and mobility there to pressure this unit off the field. I do not want it coming back. Spearmen, in the meantime, detach. Huntsmen come back online and open fire on the Chameleon Skinks, looking to melt those troops as the Silver Bullets run for dear life. Run. 47 models, unfortunately, though, get smacked in the back by that very angry Ancient Kroxigor. I let them stop for a brief second, and that is a screw-up. Silver Bullets are out. Massive misplay. If I'd kept moving, I could have potentially reached the safety of these halberds and then kept them fleeing. Single unit of handguns right now, even on half models, could be game-changing, could win us this game. But Xiphos doing an excellent job shutting them down, removes them from play. Huntsmen being run off the field in the back line, and that is just leaving this handful of crippled Huntsmen. So things looking dire. Boris, in the meantime, does shatter the Feral Stegodon. We are able to remove him as well as the Saurus and Skinks from the field. Definitely a big win there for the chunky Griffin boy. But Halberds here will get terror routed by the Stegodon, and things are looking kind of dire. Balance of power, dead center, and we're at the 7-minute mark of Total War, which usually at the 7-minute mark, there's a pretty clear victor. But here, not so much. Xiphos basically has no infantry left. He's just got a handful of Chameleon Skinks and these single unit of Cold Ones who are about to get shotgunned by that last smidgen of Huntsmen, knocking down some of those Cold One Riders with a few volleys there, and actually routing them from the field. So Xiphos losing that last little bit of cap pressure, almost out of infantry, really just down to the Skinks. But at the same time, this core, the Feral Stegodon, 6,000 HP, 4,300 on the Kroxigor, and all I got is less than 3,000 on Boris. If you think about it, that Shem's Burning Gaze, definitely not my brightest moment. Boris right now could be sitting at about almost 4,000 HP if I hadn't Shem Burning Gazed them earlier. But I am now doing my best to rally the men, rally the infantry, get this blob of infantry together, and hope those knockback changes are enough to control the 2 Lizardmen single entities and beat them down. So 8-minute mark does pass here. Chameleon Skinks are pressured back by the spears. Unfortunately, the Huntsmen have had enough. They shatter. They are not able to stick around. Same with the Silver Bullets. So tragedy striking there. If those missile units had stayed online, if we'd been able to fire just 2-3 more volleys into the Stegodon, into the Kroxigor Ancient, either of those, perhaps we would be in a better position. But right now, it's all melee infantry and Boris against a handful of characters there. And you can see they're coming in swinging, looking to smack down Boris. Pop the Horn of Kygor, looking to get that damage output, but we are able to scurry away just barely, though taking a 350 damage swing or so. Definitely not ideal. The Griffin, not the most responsive unit. It does occasionally like to kind of get stuck in an animation and not run away. So I'm using Boris here, trying to pick off Xiphos' infantry, looking for opportunities against these Skinks. We brace here with our spears, and he doesn't want to charge into the spear line. I don't blame him. Command Skinks do charge in. Supposedly one of the changes that was made is actually that braced units now don't get debraced if they stay static. So these halberds, as long as they stay still, will be braced. You can see here, I'm going to charge in with Boris. Dive in on the Chameleon Skinks, look to route them off quickly. We do route them. Horn of Kygor has expired, and now the Feral Stegodon's going to start taking some pain. The Kroxgor there whiffs against Boris, and you can see the Stegodon there losing HP relatively rapidly there to the spears and halberds of the surrounding state troops. Down to 5,900 HP very, very rapidly. Boris troops rallying in the distance. It's been a constant stream of units trying to get back in. Boris countercharges the Stegodon, looking to get some meaty hits, though failing to do so, and dropping to 2,100 HP. So it's situation critical for Boris, but as long as we muck these troops up, we will be doing some work. The Feral Stegodon there drops to 5,000 HP. Cold-blooded, of course, will keep it in the fray, but Spearmen not going to do great against the 110 armor, but halberds, of course, do hit pretty hard. And we do have this single unit of greatswords here on 3,000 HP or so with 60 models. And, well, it might not sound great. These guys are anti-infantry, of course. 30 damage, of which most is AP. I believe 23 AP here. Is going to start doing a number on these high armor units as they try to dive in after Boris. Unfortunately, though, as long as these two stay together, I really don't want to get in a fight with Boris. I dive the Stegodon, the Ancient is going to come in swing. 49 melee attack is enough to connect with Boris pretty consistently. I come in with the Stegodon, or I come in on the Ancient, the Stegodon could get a charge, and that 76 charge bonus is not something I want to face off with. Feral Stegodon here munching through the state troops who are holding their ground in the very best way they can. Halberds, though, routing from the field, running to terror, just not able to hold their ground. It's really a battle of rear charges right now. That is why I'm using Boris to chase off these skinks, trying to remove them from play. Simultaneously, that's what Xiphos is trying to get here. Rear charges on my spearmen, on my halberds, break their leadership. We're trying to crack the opponent's infantry army and with leadership bombing. And you can see the Stegodon here and the Ancient is still very good on HP. Boris dropping 1,700, definitely critical straights there. It's mostly chip damage going in on the Kroxgor Ancient. 3,400 HP there for him. So it's a trickle of damage from the spears, from these greatswords, from the halberds. The halberds right now are mostly gone. I believe they rally in the distance there. But I'm trying to keep them separated, trying to keep that infantry between Boris and at least one of these characters, and trying to avoid getting slapped around. But unfortunately, my own infantry are getting in the way. The chunky Stegodon there, looking to get a swing, but Boris able to pop Foeseeker and escape, leaving the Feral Stegodon to take some swipes from the state troops. You can see those knockback changes making a difference. Normally, back in the day, this Stegodon would probably just plow through right away, no problem, and get free. But right now, him and the Ancient definitely taking some ugly swings that they would not have taken before. Halberds rallying in the distance, coming back to their lord, rallying to the fray as this pocket of Lizardmen resistance continues slugging out. We're really not able to do very much. Boris there smacks into the Kroxgor Ancient. Doesn't actually land the charge, though. Doesn't actually do damage. And I try to pull away because I see that Stegodon coming, and it hits me. Another 400 HP or so shaved off of the poor Boris. But every time Xiphos is forced to stop and fight Boris, we do get a few return swings in there with the infantry. And you can see there Boris looking to negate the charge bonus on the Stegodon. Lands a meaty hit, but of course, Cold-Blooded will soon go down, keep the Stegodon in the fight. And the Kroxgor Ancient simply disengages to chase Boris off. Infantry, once again, looking for that opening, looking to get a charge in here. And I take Boris. I do not want to allow this to happen. I'm going to take Boris here on this infantry. Rear charge, but it's a bit close, and we pull up just in time and switch over to the Skinkor, looking to route them off from the field for good. Don't actually do that much damage because they're so spread out, but we are able to tear out them. But now Boris is in a bad spot. 1,000 HP, 660 HP on the edge of route, of course. But he squeaks away, able to take off before Xiphos is able to land a killing blow there. But balance of power swings slightly out of Empire's favor here. The infantry did manage to wipe out the remainder of this lizard infantry. Feral Stegodon very low on HP. We do still have some halberds, and more importantly, perhaps, we do have some greatswords still in the field. There's still 2,200 HP on these guys. I'm trying to pen in this Feral Stegodon, and I believe at this point Xiphos was trying to wait to see if these skinks would rally, just get this infantry back in the fray, evade my infantry for a bit, but I was trying to force him to fight, force him to stand and engage. Horn of Kygor gets popped again, just getting so much value out of that item right now because it keeps this battle is so drawn out and extended. Halberds unfortunately route. I'm really wary of a chain route right now. I need to keep Boris around the fight, but I don't necessarily want him in the fight because of how close it is right now. Horn of Kygor still active. Spears chipping down the 120 armor on the Kroxgor Ancient. Boris looking for an opening. Unfortunately, out here, I'm too far away to provide encourage and leadership, so these guys are actually going to start wavering, and I can't allow that. I cannot allow a tear out to happen. Boris is going to dive in, looking for that meaty rear charge on the Stegodon. lands in there, smacks into it from behind. Of course, Rampage is not something I'm hoping to trigger or anything. I just want to chunk it down. We're going in for all the marbles. It is a fight to the finish. Feral Stegodon here getting just bludgeoned by Boris. The Kroxigor Ancient turns around, looks to engage, looking to strike down Boris, whiffs there, and a Pyrrhic victory as a full-blown shatter hits the Lizardmen army. Last-ditch effort there. Boris on 660 HP, terror routing the Kroxigor Ancient. So brutal back and forth with Xiphos here, right down to the wire. Last vestiges of infantry there for the Empire. Last slivers of HP for the Lizardmen. You can see the Feral Stegodon very, very low. Same with the Kroxigor Ancient. And some very high value generated on some of these units. So, brutal fight. Great game there to Xiphos. Just a marathon game. Lots of back and forth. And I really could have swung either way. Now, going over the comp here, Boris did fairly well. Didn't quite pay for himself, but did some great work consistently routing the cavalry one by one, removing both Stegodons from play ultimately, eventually taking the game by terror out, which was definitely very nifty, kind of the win condition lord there. And the fact that he healed himself meant I could bring that Phos protection. I could bring my Lightcaster, and that was definitely nifty, though perhaps Trim's Burning Gaze to Boris's face was a bit stupid of me. That actually was almost game deciding. Has Xiphos landed one or two more lucky hits that game, I would have lost. And that largely came down to that early Trim's Burning Gaze, which took about 900 HP off Boris. If I hadn't used that, if I'd been a bit smarter there, used my brain, which I am not known for doing, Boris would have been at about 1500 HP at that critical stage of the late game, and that would have been enough for me to stick around and duel a little bit. It would have been enough for me to get some less risky cycle charges and perhaps won me that game a little more comfortably. Light Wizard, though, Nets did provide some value. Phos Protection and Immune Psychology all provide some value. Kind of stupid of me to let him die like that later on. If he'd stuck around alive, I would have been able to use him to chase routing units off the field, so a bit of a misplay there on my part. Spears performing admirably across the board. Keep in mind, this is a 375 gold unit, and across the board, except for this lone unit that failed me, but in all seriousness, the Spears did well. Beat down the Skinks, ground out those soaked up Chameleon's shots, and did insane damage over time to the big monsters as well as the cavalry for the lizards, and just paid dividends. Halberds, variable. Some of the halberds did not quite come up to snuff. The one unit that stuck around to the bitter end, almost 1300 damage value, mostly against those Kroxigor Ancients. And the Stegodon, just insane value generation. Doing very, very well there for themselves, showing just how much power halberds can have now if you get a good matchup, if your opponent doesn't have a lot of missile play to shut them down. Great Swords did all right, 841, 779 value, chopped up the Saurus Warriors, which is really what I wanted them for, and they stuck around to the end. Huntsmen, not so much. Now, 732 is paying for themselves, but not by much. And I really needed them to stick around and pay for themselves better. Silver Bullet's actually 1100, but I think a lot of that is just killing the caster. And I really needed these units to stick around and actually not just kill the caster, but kill units like these Stegodons. I needed them to kill the Kroxigor Ancient. And they didn't really contribute much to those fights. So they didn't get high-value moments. I guess chased away the Chameleon Skinks a bit, pressured them down, but not really doing great. Empire Knights got thrown into the grinder. Can't expect much from them there. For Xiphos, the Ancient Kroxigor did not pay for itself. 950 damage, kind of got repeatedly bogged down by Trash Infantry, blocked off by Boris. Got some meaty swings on Boris, but that was about it. I don't think he contributed much besides that. The Mage, bit disruptive. It's hard to bring a non-Slaanemer Lord and have a solid performing Mage. I don't know if a Manticore Summoner would have been better here. You could have gotten Flock of Doom and then just spam Manticores. Maybe that would have been better. On the flip side, those meaty Wind Blasts did some good damage to my front line. They melted my Silver Bullets. There were some benefits there. Hard to tell. And of course, the Curse of the Midnight Wind helps Saurus trade very well with Greatswords, so it's a tough call. Skinks, not performing up to snuff. Skinks are just not able to win against any state troops, so they need to get into the backline. In this situation, they just didn't get into the backline. They got repeatedly routed, run off, and caught in grinds with state troops. And sure, you're bogging down those spears, but eventually you will lose. Saurus performed okay, as you can see, just about paying for themselves. Just falling a bit short there, but mostly trading with great swords and the occasional spears, so it did all right. The cohort of Sotek, not quite that well. Chameleon Skinks, though, doing some insane work. 1,000 value, 1,400 value, killing off those knights, killing off my skirmishers, and pressuring Boris at certain points. Definitely very, very good stuff. Cold Ones, not so much. They got shut down. They tried to get into the back line, but they ended up running into halberd spears. Netted, charged by Boris, and fell apart. Stegodons, though, look at that value. This one, not look at that value, but this one, look at that value. 2,000 damage value. Insane stuff. A lot of that probably Chunk and Boris. So, some crazy value on some units I didn't expect. The Stegodon to 2,000 value is pretty bonkers. The value on the Chameleon Skinks is insane, and I didn't really expect that against this build because it's a lot of cheap infantry, and the only expensive unit there's Boris, but they paid dividends. Definitely in hindsight, I should have done a better job protecting my missiles, try to keep them firing on key targets. I think I wasted some of their shots early on against infantry. I really should have tried to focus the Kroxigor Ancient, because ultimately, if I'd, for example, just killed off a Stegodon very early into the game, and then as that later stage rolled around, all I had to deal with was a handful more infantry, and then say the Kroxigor Ancient and a Stegodon, I would have been in a much better position than when I had to deal with 2 Stegodons, a Kroxigor Ancient, and some cold ones there. I think my missile play was just not on point this game, and it suffered, so a bit of a misplay there. Definitely that Shem's Burning Gaze, not how you should use it, but oh well, I tried. For Xiphos, some very solid plays there. I think the scattering of his troops was kind of necessary, but also perhaps should have tried to keep at least his death ball of characters or single entities together. The one Stegodon getting overextended and trapped like that definitely ended up hurting him quite badly in the long run. If he'd managed to keep the 2 Stegodons together and the Kroxigor Ancient, then in that late game situation, I think 2 Stegodons and the Ancient, even if the Stegodons were a bit more beat up from some missile pressure from, say, a single unit of Huntsmen, that would have actually been a win. That would have been a winning situation for him. So that's my 2 cents there. I think just keeping that blob together would have been a better move, but it's just my 2 cents there. Very well played, of course. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, leave your thoughts, opinions, comments, and critiques down below. I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.